Hi everybody, I'm Luke Hector and this is The Broken Meeple. You're watching a board game YouTube channel where I talk about games, give my honest opinions regardless of whether people want to hear them or not. We'll get on with this review in just a second, but first I need to say a quick word from the sponsor. As a fellow gamer, you'll understand this is unacceptable. The solution? Head down to my new sponsor, Kiender.co.uk. Kiender stocks many of the hot new releases as well as some old hidden gems. Free delivery on orders over £30, further discounts on bulk purchases, and even 5% of your spending refunded back to you as points to be used for further discounts down the line. If you use the referral link in the description below and sign up for a new account, you'll get 5% discount on your first order over £60. So let's make gaps in your collection a thing of the past. Get down to Kiender and start saving today. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the video.
Get on with it.
So today we're taking a look at Woodcraft. This is from Ross Arnold and Vladimir Suhi, and I've been told that that's the phonetic pronunciation of his name, so if I'm butchering it, blame the viewers. But this is from Delicious Games, who are better known also for Praga Kabut Regne, Underwater Cities, Messina 1347 or whatever the tagline was. You know, these types of games, and they've all been pretty popular among Eurogamers. Certainly from my perspective, I thought Messina was kind of meh, it's alright, above average. I liked Praga fine, I don't love it, but I like it, and I really like Underwater Cities. It was on my top 100, so that's definitely my favourite of Delicious Games. In terms of Vladimir Suhi, it's a little bit more hit and miss. I don't like his older stuff, but I like his newer stuff a bit more, and Underwater Cities and Pulsar 2849 from Czech Game Editions are on my shelf and in my top 100, so these are games I really enjoy. So I was certainly keen to check in on Woodcraft, because the idea of playing woodcutters seemed quite appealing. So what you are doing in this game is you have a bunch of action tiles on your board, which correspond to buying wood, selling it, getting helpers, getting orders, etc. And what essentially happens is on your action board, you'll take a tile, it may give you a bonus depending what quadrant it's in, and you'll shift it and you'll move it all the way to the end of the next quadrant as far as it can go. This might also have you spinning this saw wheel in the middle, which unlocks potential bonuses for tiles that have been left there for a fair while. And so what you're doing with these tiles as a result is you are managing your workshop. So with your workshop, you have places to put helper cards, you have ways to upgrade your workshop with more saw blades and splicers and things like that, gather tools, but mainly you are gathering these dice which represent the different type of wood that you need to fulfill orders, which are represented by these little cards. Each card will have, you know, dice and bits at the bottom that it requires to fulfill the order. Like in this case, you get to build a little chest of drawers for a 4 yellow, a 2 green, a saw blade and a bit of glue. I'm sure it requires a bit more work to do than that, but fair enough. But it will give you a reward at the side, which will typically be hazelnut victory points or blueberries, which is the currency to buy stuff. But with your workshop, you're able to do some various dice manipulations. So with a dice, for example, a saw blade can chop dice into different pips. So a 6 brown could be chopped into a 4 and a 2, a 5 and a 1. Or with saw blades, you could make it like a 6 could be chopped into 6 ones if you really want, if you had the materials. But saw blades can cut the dice down. Glue allows you to glue dice together. So I can say, well, I need a 6 brown. Well, I've only got a 2 and a 4. Well, fine, I'll glue them together and make it into a 6. And splicers allow you to manipulate the pip values up. So with these aspects of your workshop, you're trying to fulfill the orders, and of course at the end of the game, most victory points. Of course! Now one thing to say about Woodcraft from the get-go is that this is tight. And I mean tight. I mean I'm asphyxiating myself with my own belt buckle tight. You only get 13 actions in this game in a 4-player game. You get 14 in a 2 or 3-player solo game. That's it. That is not a lot of actions. And the game box says 80 to 120 minutes. It's quite a bandwidth there, but yeah, that's not inaccurate actually. I mean, your first game is going to take you a while, so you're probably looking at more 2.5 hours with a 4-player game until you're used to the game. And obviously this is not including the setup and takedown or the teach, but you know, once you're comfortable with the game and you don't need to learn the rules, I'm confident you could get a 4-player game done in 2 hours. And solo games can be particularly quick, but more on that later. So you might think, well, okay, 13 actions for that long, that's not a lot of time per action. And no, it's not. I kind of wish there was more actions, but that tightness does mean that you are playing a big efficiency puzzle here. You've got to get your engine working, it's got to be foolproof, otherwise you're just not going to do well on the victory points. And the income phases that happen during the game happen every 4th income phase, well, slightly different in a 4-player game. So you're constantly trying to squeeze everything in such a short space of time, and your first few actions aren't even going to be that lucrative. You know, your first few actions might be pretty basic. Your engine will never really kick off until about halfway through the game, at which point it snowballs a little bit that you can do more on your turns, but it does take a little while of game time to get there. You know, I want the engine to kind of kickstart a little bit sooner, or not like have the game half over by the time it gets into full motion, but yeah, you're kind of spending the first few actions just getting little bits together, and then later on you're like, blimey, we've already used up 40% of the game and I've barely done anything. What am I supposed to do now? It's definitely tight, and if that's your type of game, you're certainly going to get that feel here. For me, I don't mind things being tight, just not stupidly tight. And this one I think's bordering that line of just being a little bit stupidly tight. Now the rules themselves, pretty straightforward actually. I was quite impressed overall. There are a few edge cases that you are going to need to check the rulebook for, and there is a nice reference sheet for all the helpers and the various contracts and that, so you can easily just pull that to the side. No reference aid per player. A little annoying, although you do have a basic kind of summary of your turn on the board, so that's not too bad, but you have to rely on the back of the rulebook for the icons and a few rules reminders, but the list of rules reminders is so vast that you're not going to be glancing at that on a regular basis. It really should have been a bit more condensed. But the rules themselves I found to be fairly straightforward. There's a lot of pictorial examples, particularly how the action wheel works, because let's face it, you need to understand this like bread and butter before you teach the game, otherwise it's going to be fiddly. But even that's not particularly complicated. I mean, you move the tile, you move it into the next quadrant, go as far as you can, spin the wheel if you go past the arrow, and if the arrow has to cross a tile, you can't do it because it's blocked. That's pretty much all you need to know about it, really. But everything else, including the actions and the free actions you get, are all explained pretty well, although there were a few edge cases where I did have to try and look things up and I couldn't quite find the answer that easily. And yeah, there is a major rule that you must not forget, which is not explained on like the tile or the reference aid. When you plant a tree, you get a free soar action with that die you use. Bear that in mind, it is vital to balancing the pots, because if you forget that rule, the pots are going to be a complete waste of time for you, and you need to know that rule exists. But unfortunately, you'll only know it exists because you've read it in the book, not because it's printed anywhere else in the game. But overall, yeah, it's not a particularly difficult game to get into. I would dare say one of the easier games to get into than for most of Vladimir Suchy's designs. Component quality? Not too bad. I mean, the tiles are fine, everything's a decent little card, it's tokens for blueberries, the dice are the basic D6s you've seen in games of old, so it's nothing particularly stellar. The artwork's good, it certainly fits the setting, although are we playing in a weird demonic setting where like puppets are making toys out of their own kin? Because I don't know about you, but the artwork for these characters, especially on the helper cards, they look like puppets. They look like they're made out of wood. And so the amount of fun that we had in our games bantering over what kind of demonic, dark, twisted world this is pretty impressive. And the book doesn't even explain what the setting is. It just keeps going on about how great woodcrafting is. And like, you are well woodcrafters. Isn't wood great? Doesn't it smell lovely? Doesn't mention a thing about the fact that blueberries are currency and this wood is magic and you can grow wood. And the fact that the people look like they're wooden puppets. I mean, I am literally controlling various demonic possessed forms of Pinocchio that have all just suddenly recently become real boys. And the graphic design is generally quite easy to understand, subject to that plant pot one I mentioned a minute ago, but generally you should be able to read most of the iconography in this game and understand what they all do, and if you don't, the icon list is right there, and this list, which you probably will refer to a couple of times at least during the game, does explain every single helper and contract, so you shouldn't end up with too many cases of confusion.
Hello? Hello, anybody home?
So a lot rides on this action wheel. So is the action wheel good? Yes. Thankfully, this, even though it feels like it was airlifted straight out of Praga Caput Regne, is the best aspect of the game. I enjoy this system. 7 action tiles, fairly easy actions, and the idea of manipulating them to go around this board and pick the opportunities for when little bonuses are there. I mean, it may be great, oh yeah, I could really do with an order right now, but then you look at another tile and you go, ooh, it hasn't been touched for a while. If I do that, I get 4 blueberries as a bonus, I get a free die of my choice, and a reputation because it's sitting on that spot. Oh, I can't let you have it. That's just too many bonuses. And so you've got that tight decision of, Do I go for the one that I was intending to go for, or do I go for the one that's got all the juicy little bonuses with it? That aspect is really cool and definitely my favourite part. But here's an aspect I do have problems with, and this is something I've discussed with a lot of people, including Ross Arnold, the designer himself, lovely chap. But the cards themselves. 4 cards go along the top, 4 along the bottom for the orders and the helpers respectively. 2 cycle every income phase. Bear in mind that's only going to happen during a game 3 times. And otherwise it's a case of when somebody buys something, another one will come out. Now, the player scaling is a bit off, because if you play only solo or 2 players, these cards do not cycle at all, barely. It's like, it doesn't cycle anywhere near quick enough. So if the cards aren't out that you want, you're kind of screwed. But then let's say you play 4 players. Okay, people are buying those cards more often. The problem is, it's being bought so often that chances are you'll miss out on the card you want easily enough. But it's not so much just that. The problem I have is that when you're playing this game, there's usually some various routes that you can go down. It's like, right, I'm going to go heavy on the workshop, I'm going to go heavy on the helpers, I'm going to go get a bunch of tools, which are stupid powerful if you can get a bunch of them out. But whichever route you pick, you're hoping that you can get the orders and the various things that work with that. So let's say I start off early and get a bunch of tools. Okay, great, I should probably get a bunch more tools, and I'm going to go down that route because there's a public contract for it. The problem is, a lot of your game is dictated by the order cards that come out. These cause a lot of swingy moments of, like, convenient happenstance for various players. So I might have a situation where a bunch of orders came out that all had tools as a reward. Oh, fantastic. Right, I'm going to get started on the tools. I've made a nice start. Fantastic. You then get the next 4 out and none of them have tools. Oh, okay. How else do I get tools? I can get to that bit on the track and that's it. Oh, alright, well, I'll give it a bit of time. Maybe 4 more will come out. Okay, 4 more come out and you end up with
nothing!
And even if they do come out of the deck later, remember this is a 13 action game. You don't have time to wait for the good stuff to come out. You're stuck with what you have, which does make this a game that you can't really strategize. But the problem is that for the person who does go down a route, who does get the cards that they need, they are going to win the game flat out stat. It's just going to happen. And I've had games like that, where somebody has gone for reputation. It's like, okay, I've started off with a bit of reputation, fine. And then the reputation dries up. And suddenly the fact that they've done a bunch of orders is meaningless because they don't get any points for the reputation bar because they can't get enough of it to level up. But then somebody who went for tools suddenly ends up with all the order cards that give tools, you know, a bunch of other things that will give tools, and suddenly it's like, oh right, I've filled up my entire attic and look at this acceleration I've got and I'm going to win with 130 odd points. You're not even breaking 100. It causes a lot of those little swings, and that is a little annoying, and it does hurt my enjoyment of the game quite a bit, because I'm feeling like the game is playing me at that point. Like, I'm not choosing a path to victory and following that path. I'm reacting solely to 4 cards that come out on the display. I feel like you need to double that number, particularly in a 4-player game. You need 8 cards on view to see what's there, so that if somebody is choosing a particular path, something should be there that's available to them. But 4 is just very, very restrictive. So you might argue, well, okay, you've got to make good use of what you have there. But again, as I said, if somebody gets what they need, they're going to do better than somebody else who just picks up something half decent from what's there. And I just feel that there just needed to be a little bit more option available. Now, I've not tried a house rule where I double the display like that, although might be something I try in the future. But as the way it's designed, it's only 4 cards, only 4 orders, only 4 helpers, and you know, even the helpers have the same problem. You know, somebody might just happen to get a helper pop out of nowhere that gives them 2 reputation for buying it. Oh great, so I just went through this entire 2-turn phase of, right, I need to sell that die to get this round 6, and then I need to upgrade my workshop, which then allows me to chop this die into several browns, and because I've got the glue token from there, I can put it all together and I make this order. That gets me 2 rep and a little bit of money. Ah, good, that felt good. 2 rounds, but I got that order done. And that's 2 reputation, great. Somebody then, like, on another turn, a helper comes out of the deck and it gives 2 reputation straight like that. Oh, come on! I mean, you just got the same reward I did for a convenient card popping out of the deck, and I had to go through 2 rounds worth of hell in order to get to that point. There's a lot of weird cards in here that just seem a little bit too good for their own good, but also it's just that, you know, these cause some swingy moments, and I would just like maybe a little bit more control over that, and I reckon maybe extending the display would do that. Would it cause a little bit of extra analysis paralysis? Yes, and certainly this game does lend itself to a fair bit of analysis paralysis. But for me, I just need that choice, because as much as I enjoy a lot of aspects of this game, that part really does great. There's not a lot of player interaction either, honestly. I mean, if you're playing this with more players, all you're really doing is adding time, because you don't manipulate anybody else's workshop. All you do is race to a couple of reputation tiles on this board, and you grab an order before someone else does. That's literally it. There's, you know, apart from manipulating his action board, again, you could do it with a random card flip and it would have the same aspect as a multiplayer game. In fact, you can do that because somewhere around here there are solo cards. They're in a deck somewhere, I don't know. But all you basically have is a 10-card deck that flips over a card and you move tiles or gain reputation for a dummy player based on the card. It chases down public contracts and it moves tiles around. That's literally all the solo mode is, which is why I'm not doing a separate video. It's beat your own score, it's the exact same game with a couple of minor tweaks. And honestly, I would have originally said, oh yeah, that's much better because I shaved the time length down to like 60 minutes tops. I mean, you can get through a solo game of this really quickly if you know what you're doing. But there's a bigger problem with the solo mode. Remember the cycling of cards? It just doesn't happen enough with less players, and in solo mode in particular, it pretty much never happens. You know, the card deck is skewed with all the different aspects. There might be like a couple in there that change order cards, and that's it. So you go through a 10-card deck. By the time you've got through 10 cards, you've only got 4 rounds of the game left. So it's only going to rinse repeat us so much. So you are stuck with most of the same orders and cards. Other than the refresh from the level 1 decks to the level 2 decks, you're stuck with the same stuff for most of the game. There's a massive problem with the lumberyard in that respect. This part down here where you've got dice in storage that you can buy, the AI player pretty much never buys from there. So if you've got a situation like I had last game where I could really do with some good yellows, but the only thing there is 2 1s for the entire game, well, what am I supposed to do? It's really hard for me to get yellows. I'm screwed. What am I supposed to do? You know, it's going to take too much effort to get stuff and glue them together and all that, when it would be a lot easier if it just happened to be a 6 in there that I could grab. You know, or, you know, a different number than 1. And the solo mode is kind of killed in that respect. It's quick, it's simple, and you get to enjoy the puzzle aspect, but because you are basically dictated in even more by the cards, it ruins the fun. But one aspect that I do want to talk about is these public contracts. You start off with a couple of hazelnut orders that allow you to get these public contracts, and they are pretty much what you think they are. They give you like an objective, and you'll score points based on them. Several of them will be out during the game, and I am telling you right now, get both of them. You end up with 2 hazelnut orders, and you can get 2 of these. You need to focus on 2 of these and get them stacked, because the points you earn from these are quite sick. Each one can cap out at somewhere around the 18-point mark, other than a couple of lower point ones that don't require much effort. But it's not too difficult to get 18 points in one of them, and you should be able to get most of the points in another if you just gun for that all game. And so the points that I have seen people just accelerate like crazy, like I've got a bunch of bonuses all game, I've done a decent amount of orders, I got some rep, you know what, I feel like I've had a good game, and the scores are relatively tight. And then because I decided to take 1 contract, not 2, I took the 5 blueberry 5-point method on the hazelnut order, I lose outright because somebody else has done 2 cards, I've done 1, 5 points pales to 16-18. You need to do 2 of these. But one aspect I really hate with this, really hate, is the fact that they are first come, first serve. This is a game where turn order doesn't matter, except that you have to grab these in the same round as someone else, otherwise they're gone. You don't get them. And so somebody who goes last ends up sniping one that you don't realise, and you've got no way to react to it. It's just gone. And you're talking 18 points. Let's say that you both play the hazelnut order at the same time, but the other player just happens to be 1 turn ahead of you and so manages to get their hazelnut order done in advance. They nick the one that needs 6 helpers. You spent most of your game getting 5-6 helpers and you've lost 18 points. It cripples you out of the entire game.
Oh, yes! I hate this!
In fact, to be honest, I'm house ruling this. From now on, I'm house ruling it. You don't take the card, it's not gone out of the game. Simply, you do the hazelnut order, you get to put your cube on one of these, and you get to claim it. So it still forces you to do the order, but it doesn't put in this unnecessary punishing aspect where just because you were a turn late, you lose out on the entire game. That's too punishing in the game that's already pretty tight and restrictive. I'm house ruling that stat. So Woodcraft overall is an enjoyable experience. I've liked it, and there are certain aspects I really like in it. I mean, the artwork is demonic and creepy, but it's still quite good. It's simple to get into for a Vladimir Suchy game. It's not too, bogged down with rules, even though you do have a couple of edge cases that you must bear in mind because they're not on the reference aid. But for the most part, you should be able to get into this game, and after some practice, get a 4-player done in about 2 and a bit hours with the setup, 2.5 maybe. But you could get through a solo game really quick, 2 or 3 players, you could get done in much less. It's a relatively speedy and elegant game for what generally tends to come out of delicious games. And the action wheel, love it as well. I think the tiles movement on this and the bonuses and the little opportunities you get is really cool, and everybody I've played it with has agreed that this is the best aspect of the game, even if it's basically just a clone of Prago Kaput Regne with some tweaks. But I do have problems with what I've said before. I do think that the fact that your game is kind of dictated by the orders that come out is very limiting. I don't like the fact that it is only 13 or 14 actions because I just find that too tight. It's very restrictive, especially when the first 4 to 7 actions are not going to get you a ton during the game. It doesn't really kick into high gear until halfway through the game, at which point you've then only got about 6-7 actions to play with. I would like it to maybe just be more actions or just have the engine kick into gear a little bit quicker. But just the idea that, oh yeah, if I get a bunch of tools, I'll do really well. If only the cards would come out that gave me some tools. I've got a bunch of orders done. Why do no orders come out? That give me a lot of reputation. And, alright, I've got a bunch of dice in my storage here. And the next card that comes out is, it wants all brown. Well, I've got a bunch of green and yellows here. There's good storage, but nope, the one I need just happens to need brown. And I just find that really limiting and punishing. Add in a few little annoyances like the public contracts being first come first serve. That's stupid, but I can house rule that easily enough. Those things do get in the way, and certainly for solo players this isn't really going to be a thing for you because the cards just don't cycle quick enough, even though a solo play is going to be really, really quick and pretty straightforward. So Woodcraft is cool. I have to compare it to a few games I've done recently in terms of rating, and I was going to give it only a 6, but I think it's good enough and there's enough positive elements to it, especially compared to some of the other Euro games I've played lately, that I'm going to give it a decent 7 out of 10. It's getting a seal of endorsement. I've enjoyed my time with it. Is it going to be a keeper? I don't know. I'm going to try it with a couple of house rules. I'm going to extend that flop display. I'm certainly going to house rule this aspect. And I'll see how the game plays after that. And if that improves the score for me, I'll hang on to the game and be really glad of it. But if it doesn't, then I don't know if it will necessarily be a keeper. But I've enjoyed it. It's good. I can recommend it. I think some people are not going to be too bothered by how limiting and tight it is. That might be the game they're gunning for, in which case, by all means, grab this because you're going to get exactly what you desire. But I would argue that the point about the flop being very limiting is still a bit of an issue in this game, regardless of whether you want it to be super tight or not. But I'm going to say 7 out of 10. Still like it. It's good. But a few things just cut it down from being a great game, which it could easily have been. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. I'll see you on the next video I do. Until next time, you can thumb up the video, share it on social media, or subscribe to the channel or the Patreon to help me out with more review copies. And trust me, Essen was expensive. But until next time, you can check out more content on the channel, including the video review I've done for Oathsworn. That was a bit of a biggie. But also, my Top 100 has concluded. You can check out the final segment of it now. So take care, and remember as always, regardless of what you're doing with demonic, crazy Pinocchio puppets, it's still only a game. Bye for now.